So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We've been running these Coach Socialization series for about 2 months now since the isolation period in Nova Scotia started. And we started this with the intent to provide a platform for our coaches to connect and learn from each other and learn from a variety of professionals. So we're really happy to see such a variety of coaches from different sports joining us and from all across the country. It's so great to see. So tonight we have two sport dietitians with us from Canadian Sports Center Atlantic. So we have Melissa and Angela here with us tonight to talk to us about nutrition recovery considerations. So this idea kind of came to life after we learned from Craig about sleep recovery considerations and how that really impacts your recovery, or athletes' recovery, also coaches too. And so we wanted to dive into kind of the nutrition side of that. So they will be giving a presentation followed by a Q&A. So during the presentation, just stick to the chat box unless told otherwise. And then at the end, we'll open it up for a Q&A. So Melissa and Angela, you can take it away from here. Thank you.
Hello, Melissa. Do you want me to, you're going to screen share?
Yeah, I'm on it. There we are.
Perfect. Well, thanks everybody for coming. Melissa's going to kick it off, and then I'm going to do the second part in terms of nutrition recovery. So either, promoting recovery or recovery from injury. So there's two sort of separate pieces or topics that we'll kind of cover. They kind of go hand in hand, as you'll see. But thanks for joining. There's a ton of coaches on tonight. So I just finished teaching for 3 hours online, so I'll get a bit of a breather. Melissa will take you through the first half, and we'll probably be no more than like 45 minutes. I plan on doing a little demo in my kitchen, but my little guy has a fort built in my kitchen where he's planning on sleeping tonight. So that kibosh that plan. Go ahead, Melissa.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Angela. Yeah, so I'm Melissa. I think this is my third time doing one of these coaches sessions, which is super awesome. I really love it. It's such a fun way to connect with so many different coaches that are out there. So yeah, like Angela said, we're going to cover nutrition, like recovery nutrition stuff. I know this is always probably one of the top 2 or 3 things that we get asked about when we're first starting out with a new team. This is always one of the big areas that everyone's curious about. I'm going to start with the general stuff, and then Angela's going to go into a bit more depth around some more specific nutrition recovery stuff that pertains to kind of the circumstances that we have right now. So let's continue on. So yeah, I'm doing nutrition after training. So whatever the athletes are happening to do right now for training, and also thank goodness, now that we're getting back to more of a normal-ish world, hopefully some of the sports are going to be able to start training more normal. This is really going to help dig into that side of it. So of course, the first thing that we have to cover is why is it important? What are the consequences if we don't recover properly, or if your athletes don't recover properly? And just one thing that I really want to highlight, and I'm probably going to speak to it way too many times in my little short talk, is that some of this nutrition recovery really has to do with particularly when athletes are training multiple times every day. So a lot of the athletes that you probably each work with do work out multiple times a day, but there are instances where they don't. But this recovery nutrition is very specific for that point when there's not a lot of time to recover in between training sessions. So if they don't recover properly, obviously there's going to be more fatigue, whether it's during the training or when they go to school or work later. There will be one day when our athletes have to actually go back to school again. I know it seems like a long time ago, but it will happen again when they have to actually go back to school and physically go there. And for a lot of athletes in sports, they train in the morning and then they have to go and spend the rest of their day in a classroom trying to pay attention and educate themselves. So making sure that they get this adequate nutrition is going to make it so that they're not so exhausted that they can't pay attention and they fall asleep while they're in class or at work. And then even their performance at the next session that they do, that's going to be greatly impacted. A lot of athletes don't think about it, or we tend to think about recovery and nutrition more in terms of like what we just did, but it's even more so about like the next time that we train. So, or the next time that the athlete trains, if they don't take care of that nutrition, the next time that they're out there training or competing, their performance isn't going to be at the top that it potentially could be. And then even like the gains that they get from the session that they just completed, they're not going to get as many gains if their recovery isn't to the level that it should be. And then another big area that athletes don't often realize is that muscle soreness that like nobody wants, because it's not that fun. It's not going to make your next training session potentially as good as it could be. It's that soreness. And so if we don't have proper recovery nutrition, we can actually be more sore than what we would be.
And sometimes, Melissa, the increased muscle soreness is not just increased, but a delayed onset. So the DOMS, is a big indication that they may not be adequately recovering in between or just even after their sessions.
Yeah, perfect. That's an awesome comment. Thank you, Angela. Totally true. Huge thing. So something that Angela and I talk about all the time are the 4 R's of recovery. Thanks for adding in rest. I even forgot that when I made the slides. Angela had to put that 4th one in there. So there's 4 R's of recovery. Rehydrate, which like honestly gets tucked into like the very bottom and nobody ever thinks about it, but probably like one of the top things that athletes should really be thinking about in the recovery is that rehydrate and refuel. And refuel is like carbohydrate specific. And then protein kind of comes into play. And then also, of course, like rest, they've got to recover. So obviously like the main focus for a lot of athletes and coaches, especially in like competition, is like you want to restore that homeostasis or like rebuild those nutrient stores as soon as possible so they can be at like the optimal level, the top level, because they want to be like recovered as best as they can to like train again or to like go compete against like opponents or whoever they're racing against. And also just like in a training session, they also want to be like as refueled, as recovered as possible, just so they can hit that intensity and that speed and technique and skill. But let's be honest, it's not always going to be training at such a high intensity. There are going to be light workouts, or there might even be like easy competition. And so sometimes when we're doing these training sessions, we have to keep in mind that not every single workout or every single instance that your athletes are competing, are they like tapping into like all of their stores of energy. And it might not necessarily be like a thing that they have to like do a specific recovery fueling session the way that we've been thinking about it. There's almost a switch within sports nutrition, or like I think I've seen like recently is that we always kind of had this like one size fits all for nutrition in the recovery side of it, where like you work out, you have to do a recovery, workout, you have to do a recovery. But we have to realize that just like anything that we talk about, there are going to be like personal things that we need to adapt to. And also like if it's not a super intense workout, has your athlete actually tapped into all of their fuels? Do they need to like do a full recovery nutrition? So
I was just going to say too, if it's in between, I always get the question, if you've got multi-event days, so if you're in like a competition scenario, are we looking at, 60 grams of 60 grams of carbohydrate, 30 grams of protein after every, 30-second heat that athlete might be in? And that might not be practical, obviously, to get that amount of nutrients within a sometimes 30-minute window and then be able to digest all of that. So again, practicality comes into play, and common sense. We don't necessarily need to get that amount of carbs and protein in between each of those events. Definitely at the end of their event, and maybe getting little bits of protein, but not necessarily focusing on that full overall recovery protocol that Melissa's going to talk about in a second. So that's always a question I get. Like, do I need to get that much in like 4 times a day if I have 4 heats in a day? And no, their tummies would be not happy.
Not in any way, shape, or form. And it's always like thinking about like each session is going to differ. Each race is going to differ. How much did they sweat? How much did they deplete? How much did they like tap into their protein synthesis or like cause damage and disruption? And right, like you can't ask an athlete to put 80 grams of carbohydrates and like 20 grams of protein into their belly every time that they do a really short sprint. Like if I was thinking of the world of canoe kayak, where it's a couple minutes when they're competing every time, and then ask them to like do that massive recovery, that's not going to work in their lives at all. Go away. There we go. So, and this is just again to like kind of drive home that concept that we've been talking about. And I know this isn't the world of most of the higher level athletes, but some of our athletes do. Like if you're only having a training session like once a day, or for us regular folks, where maybe we only train like a couple times a week, it's the idea that like the normal nutrition that we do through like our meals and our snacks should actually be enough to compensate for what we've expended. Like recovery nutrition is super important, but we'll get into like some more details around like how much time you actually do have to meet some of those recovery needs if you have the time. It's just that a lot of the athletes that you deal with on your day-to-day, they do like 2 or more sessions a day, or it's a competition, just like Angela was saying, and so you don't have a ton of time to like build up your recovery and refuel. So these are some of like just the quick, like again, I think I've mentioned my sports science a couple times and I've done these presentations just because he does such a good job at doing these infographics. So quick recovery guidelines, this would be for like that quick recovery, like you have 2 sessions in a day, your athletes do, or even if they have a late night session and then they have to get up in the morning and they have another session right away in the morning again. That's like kind of like that 8 hours or less-ish, give or take. That's kind of like a quick turnaround. So they want to make sure that they get those carbohydrates. And we'll dig a bit into that more in like a second on the slide. So 1 to 1.2 grams per kg. Really want to make sure that that hydration gets covered. Dehydration is so detrimental to overall health and just the ability of the athlete to do what they want to and to recover and be running on full cylinders. There's that whole idea, a thought process around like antioxidants and like tart cherry juice and protein. I'll tap into that a little bit. Angela will dig into it some more later, just like some of those antioxidants and tart cherry juice stuff. And then protein, that is like, we have to remember like carbohydrates, as much as we love to hate them, they are the rock stars and they are the thing that we need to get into our bodies. Protein does come into it, but it's more on like the long-term recovery time that we're really having to focus on that protein. So if we are in a competition and we need to get food into us in between like these short bouts, the focus needs to be on carbohydrates, not so much on protein, just like Angela was kind of saying. Like don't overfill their stomach with a bunch of protein. Make sure we focus on that carbohydrate because that's going to be where that energy source is coming from.
And we're not going to get into the types of carbohydrate tonight.
That's a whole other.
That's a week long. That's a whole half credit course. Because yeah, complex, simple, depends on how much time you have, depends on how, I mean, we've got fructose, glucose, sucrose, maltodextrins, different types of saccharides that are digested very differently. So just because one type of sport food or food doesn't work well with one athlete, you shouldn't throw it out with the baby with the bathwater. Again, there's lots of individual variability in terms of how we absorb, how quickly we absorb those carbohydrates and how much time you have. So maybe that's another coach's session.
Mm-hmm. Carbohydrates, they're intense. So again, this recovery question, I know Angela probably gets this asked 4 gazillion times like I do, like how quick should we have recovery? If we're going to do recovery, like especially if we've got that limited time frame in between, like 8 hours or less, like 2 training sessions in a day, that kind of idea. How quickly do I need to get nutrition in? So obviously like hydration as soon as possible. Doesn't even like, doesn't matter what training session, just get hydration in as soon as possible. And then proteins and carbs, that's where it starts to like flex a little bit. So your body is most efficient to replace carbohydrates and rebuild muscles within that first like hour and a half, but it will keep on rebuilding for like 12 to 24 hours. So that's why if you have an extended amount of time, that's why that like really quick recovery isn't quite as crucial as it is if you've got like another training session or another competition coming up right after. Like, just like the next point says, if you got back-to-back or 2 sessions a day, you really want to maximize that recovery the first hour, hour and a half. But like, honestly, I know I've heard Angela say this many times as well, as like the rule of thumb is like as soon as possible kind of idea.
That's because lazy athletes forget.
And they don't realize, they don't realize how long they've been like not training too. They're like chatting and hanging out. Yeah.
And so that doesn't take into consideration either, Melissa, to how quick our muscle glycogen actually depletes. So it definitely depends on intensity. Time, we know, full depletion can happen within 45 minutes, but actual muscle glycogen starts to deplete, or can start to deplete, after like 15 minutes of intense, strenuous training. So this doesn't take again into consideration the replacement during activity of carbohydrate. That might already be at a deficit because they're not taking it in enough during training. And then they've got the double whammy on top of that for replacement, for recovery, and the added benefit of having that carbohydrate to support the protein synthesis in the recovery phase. So it's kind of like a double whammy for them if they don't start to replace the carbohydrate during, which most of them don't, and they don't think about it in maybe an hour, or 45-minute intense training bout. And yes, it can happen within a strength and conditioning lift, or a 45-minute long sort of run. Again, they need to start kind of experimenting and training the gut, which I think Melissa's going to talk to a little bit about that replacement of carbohydrate.
A little. Oh, you mean afterwards? I didn't even touch the like during stuff. That's a whole other, like you're saying, a whole other conversation. This is the hopes that they're like doing a little bit of carbohydrates while they're exercising, for sure. And there is some like interesting research too about some stuff about like protein synthesis and like carbohydrates and like glucose storage. And some of it was like, if your athletes are not going to consume enough carbohydrates in the recovery, which definitely happens because we're all afraid of carbohydrates, adding some protein in definitely helps with like making sure that they get more glucose storage. Your body can absorb it more. But if they're actually consuming enough carbohydrates in the recovery, then the protein doesn't help with the absorption of carbohydrates, if that makes sense. It sounds pretty complicated. But anyway, so if you do have 24 hours or longer, so if it's like a training session in the morning and you just like you're off afternoon, or you just happen to be training just once that day, then from most often your regular meals or your snacks are going to be enough of a recovery nutrition. Obviously, if you're a long distance runner and you go out for a 5-hour run, then probably we need to think about doing like some more recovery nutrition. But for a lot of like the sports, a couple hours, as long as they're taking in their carbohydrates during the training session, just like Angela mentioned, that recovery meal snack can kind of be, or your regular meal or snack can be part of your recovery nutrition, because you've got that 24 hours, or they do, to try and replenish and rebuild their stores. And then some athletes will actually do like a split recovery. So they'll bring like more of a small snack for right after, and then they'll go home and have their main meal. And that's one way that they can kind of make up for some of that recovery component, but that's when they have those 24 hours or longer to recover. And then obviously, again, because athletes all have like their different goals, they're all on different paths. So some of them are going to be looking for, you might have really high energy like needs athletes, either they're trying to like gain muscle mass or just put on mass in some way. So those athletes, when they're just trying to get as much nutrition into their body as possible, then that recovery piece after any workout kind of fits in there no matter what. So and that whole idea is that you're just trying to get as much into them on a continuous basis as you can. So whether it's a shorter workout session or it's not super intense, or you only have one that day, if it's an athlete that has really high energy needs, like they're really trying to hit goals of like muscle gain or mass in some way, that recovery can still fit in there, because just with them, often they don't have a lot of stomach space, or they fill up quite easily, or you convince an athlete to eat 6 chicken breasts at supper. Like, that's unrealistic and not necessary. But just as an example, so like more often like small frequent meals for someone who's trying to get more energy or gain mass, then maybe like recovery nutrition all the time is not a bad idea. Whereas if someone's got more of like a restricted energy budget, so someone who's trying to lean or to cut for some reason, then we're going to have to start thinking about either adjusting their schedule so that their meal kind of slides in after a recovery session and becomes like recovery and meal, or you can do something where they just have a little snack after as part of their recovery, and then they go to have their meal, but calculate the fact that some of their meal was already used in their recovery, if that makes sense. So just that idea that every athlete's different, you have to work with some of their goals and their targets. So really quickly, because I don't want to take up too much time here, some of the recovery targets that we're looking for: carbohydrates, because they are the king for recovery. You really want to make sure that you get like 1 to 1.2 grams per kg. Again, it's individual, right? Based on like the athlete and how much they weigh. That kind of helps determine how many carbohydrates they need.
I think it goes as high as 1.5.
Fuel.
Yeah. I think it goes as high as 1.5 grams per kilo. Again, based on more aerobic types of training and intensity, duration, etc. So it's a bit of a window. Mm-hmm. So as we always like to say, Melissa's going to probably get to it, we have a ratio of carbs to protein, and if they can just think of getting that bare minimum in, if you get to this level, which we got some high performance athletes that we've got 1, 2, 3 different types of recovery shakes that have varying levels of carbs and protein, and if you want to get that specific, but really hitting the base is just as important if they're not doing anything anyway.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I love about nutrition, is how individual it can get, and like how much, it's just so crazy how much you can dial everything in with athletes. But obviously this is a platform for stepping off on for each of the athletes. And then, get the carbohydrates soon after or as soon as possible. Hydration, like 125 to 150% of like how much they've lost when they were exercising in like the next 2 to 4 hours. Again, you can get super specific with that, right, Angela, by like sampling exactly how much they sweat and analyzing their sodium loss and everything like that. But as a general rule, 125 to 150% of what they've lost while they're exercising. So like through sweat and everything.
Yeah, and if they're training again within 24 hours, which most of them are, that's where you get like that extra 50%. So they need to replace what they've lost and prepare for hydration or normal hydration levels for the next training bout. If they're really doing awesome and being hydrated all through their training, then they would only need to replace 1 to 1. So kilo lost, a liter, right, equals a kilo. So really easy way of doing it. If they haven't lost anything, then they can just continue their normal hydration practices without getting like super compensating that dehydration.
Totally. I would love if most athletes were in that scenario. It doesn't happen very often. I don't know about your experience, but most of us are dehydrated all the time, unfortunately. And then electrolytes, replace those, either whether they're adding them in the water or also if you're eating a meal afterwards, just making sure you get salty food can actually help you to absorb more of that hydration. And then protein, this is kind of that what Angela was speaking to, like we usually say like 20 to 30 grams of protein afterwards, like as soon as possible after exercise, if you're in that proactive refueling. So you've got to train again or compete again in the next short little while. And then again, Angela is going to speak to this, but consider the quality of the protein that you're taking in and making sure that there are appropriate amino acids. I'll definitely let her touch on that. And then one really key thing about protein is this idea that we need to remember, like optimal protein is having these strategic amounts of protein on a regular basis throughout the day. So not loading it into one meal or 1 or 2 meals every day, but like every 3 to 4 hours, trying to get that 20 grams at least of protein every 3 to 4 hours. And that recovery. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, and the reason for that, I mean, it's based on science. A couple things. When kids need more protein than an adult bodybuilder, they need 2 grams per kilo, approximately, depending, right, what their individual situation is. And the research shows that the anabolic window of protein synthesis, or maximizing protein synthesis, occurs over 24 hours. So they need a crap ton of protein. Can they get that all in an 8-hour day or 3 meals? Probably not. So meeting the overall protein, but B, we know that we can maximize or optimize that muscle protein synthesis when we have, and the research is pushing 40 grams right now, but it's still recommended at 35 bolus bouts of protein, quality protein. If we were to actually feed protein through the night, so there's the old movie, The Boxer, the $1 Million Baby, was it Hallie? Anyway, can't remember who she was. She like jacked right up, and in the movie it actually showed her getting up in the middle of the night and having protein, and you may see some like YouTube videos of that, and there is some kind of merit behind that, because if we were to actually feed you intravenously protein through the night, you're probably going to maximize that protein synthesis. But then that's going to negate all the sleep recovery stuff you've just learned and the importance of sleep. So we want to make sure we actually get a pretty decent amount of protein, quality protein in right before bed, like an hour before, and that'll kind of at least sustain some of that remodeling or that resynthesis through the night. And then again, have that in the morning. But breaking it out is probably going to be the easiest way to do that, just to get the total amount in, and then to maximize those windows all throughout that 24-hour or 18-hour period. Probably less than 18. Who sleeps 8 hours a week? 8 hours a night? I don't know.
We should, but we don't. So this is a super busy slide, but I just want to quickly show like some ideas of like proactive refueling kind of stuff that we can do. On the left-hand side is carbohydrate rich selection. So things to have afterwards that are going to be like super carbohydrate dense would be like bread, cereals, grains, sweetened dairy, fruits and starchy veggies. And then if we're going to like mix and match some of these ideas into a meal, that'd be like cereal and fruit, sandwiches, smoothies, some tasty like curry and rice or pasta, do some stir fry or some risotto, super delicious things. And then if we want these like really compact, so maybe if we're not like a really big eater, your athlete, we can slip in some extra compact carbohydrates and like sports drinks or liquid meals, bars, gels, good old jam that your grandma made or maybe you bought from the store, and some honey. And then your juice and soft drinks, obviously those are packed full of carbohydrates. We all have been taught that so much. And then on the right hand side is like food sources of high quality protein. Again, Angela's going to kind of cover what high quality means, because there's specific amino acids that really push that into the classification of being high quality. These all provide like the 10 grams of protein. So like 2 eggs, skim milk powder. Nobody realizes how awesome skim milk powder is. You can put that stuff in anything and it really bumps up the protein content. Just drink milk. You can have cheese, cottage cheese, yogurt, your different meats, chicken, fish, then tofu or soy ground. So like your ground rounds kind of stuff for your soy milk. And it is interesting. Obviously, I'm sure many of you have realized that that's all like dairy products or meat products. And that Angela will speak to. And then soy, that's like the one higher non-meat or dairy product that has the high amounts of the leucine, which is what kind of bumps it into high quality protein territory. And then sport foods, obviously protein powder, if that's something that your athlete chooses to use, or your liquid meal replacements, your fancy sport bars. And then in the very bottom right-hand corner, it is really interesting, like the rapidly digested protein sources. So that's like your milk and your flavored milk, milkshake, smoothies, yogurt. So a lot of that you just have to keep in mind, because there's protein and there's carbohydrates and also hydration, kind of is like a little bundle of giving you a lot of what you need in your recovery. So you're getting that fluid, you're getting that protein and the carbohydrates from some of those options in the bottom right-hand corner. And then quickly, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the chats mentioned, like, what about chocolate milk? Because that's always the big, like, hoorah for recovery. Can you do it with white milk? Absolutely. It's the same quality in terms of protein, just doesn't have extra sugar. So you need about 2 cups of chocolate milk just to get the amounts of carbs and protein. But you can absolutely do it with 2 cups of white milk and throw in a banana and not have the extra sugar coming from sucrose.
Yeah, and if you can't do dairy, soy too, right? Like that would be your next best option. Would you agree, Angela? Soy chocolate milk or soy milk, if you couldn't do dairy for like that same kind of genre.
Yeah, don't be fooled with almond, hemp, any of those nut milks. They're really virtually nothing for protein. They've got 1 gram, but they do have some calcium and vitamin D added back, but nothing for protein. So don't make that equal chocolate milk alternative.
Yeah, but soy is right up there, close to dairy for sure. These are just everyone's always asking for like quick, easy recovery snack ideas. These seem super basic, but this is would be awesome recovery snacks. Like yogurt and berries, that's like, if I could think of national team athletes that I know, this is pretty much what I see them carrying around every single time is yogurt and berries. Your trail mix, there's an apple and peanut butter. You can do like hummus and crackers, make your own like stellar homemade egg McMuffins. They're way better than anything that you'll buy at McDonald's, I swear. You can just make your own protein muffins. Angela's got lots of great recipes for that. Your smoothie, like you can load it full of amazing recovery and nutrition, your smoothie, and get some hydration at the same time. Just classic, like oatmeal with some berries, dried or fresh. Sprinkle a little sugar on there for extra sweetness if you feel the magic. Yeah, so there's lots of really easy things you can do. Make your own energy bars, or you can buy it, because many of us don't always have time to like be super prepared. You can always just have a bar in your bag that's going to be able to hold you over until you get home. So that's my section. It's on to you now, Angela.
Cool. Well, I'm just going to touch on a couple questions that just came up while the topic's hot.
Awesome.
So, and I knew that was going to be a question is, what do we do with protein powders? Anyone under 18, I don't know. We don't have the research on under 18. Ethically, it hasn't been done. Protein powders are probably one of the least risk supplements. Like they're not going to grow a third arm or something, but it's still general policy, and we are coming out with a supplement policy from OTP and COPSIN, the Canadian Olympic Paralympic Sport Institutes and Networks, soon. So I'm sure that will be a statement in the in that policy, in that position statement, that anyone under the 18, no supplements other than, nutrition supplements, iron, vitamins, etc. But sports supplements or performance enhancing supplements will not be recommended. So as Melissa had pointed out, skim milk powder is a great food safe alternative. When you're getting into other protein powders over 18, you want to look for isolates. They have 3 different types. You have concentrates, isolates, and hydrolysates. So isolates are going to be your extra filtered whey specifically, or soy. There are other, pea-based forms of protein. Quality is probably not there in terms of all of the amino acids or essential amino acids that we would want in the recovery phase, but great ways of getting extra protein in for sure. Because when you're looking at, again, amounts of protein through the day, athletes traveling, countries that don't want to eat meat or questionable meat then that's where protein powders become a friend to help meet their overall needs. Other, again, forms of protein we want to just make sure, or like supplements in general, which I'll talk about in a second, is just making sure they're third-party tested. So I don't think we have the picture of the NSF certified for sport logo or the informed sport logo, which is every batch of those products are tested. Those would be what we would recommend in terms of supplements, just to reduce any potential risk of cross-contamination with other other banned substances. The other question was about sports bars, and should we be concerned about sugar? Yeah, absolutely. Like, you look at a Cliff Bar and what do you see? There's like 500 ingredients that you can barely read on the label. Yeah, that's always, and sometimes they're a crutch. They're, a crutch for those who are lazy, who don't want to put the time and effort into making a quick smoothie or a quick energy ball, which literally I did on Instagram Live for the first time ever yesterday, with a group of football athletes, and we did it in 10 minutes. I didn't even get to make them into a ball. They're just in the fridge, like with a spoon right now. So yeah, you can definitely control the amount of sugar in some of these bars. And on the other side of that, some of the bars don't have enough sugar or enough carbohydrate or quality carbohydrate to actually make it a complete recovery bar. We have groups that we have in, and that's a whole session we do. I throw out a bunch of different common recovery bars, and they look at the label and does it meet the 60-20, 80-30 carbs to protein amounts? Most times they don't. So they're either going to have to take 2 Cliff Bars. Nobody wants to do that. And they're expensive. But definitely in a crunch, absolutely. They're great for travel. Sometimes they're, staples for after competitions and things like that. But yeah, we should be concerned with getting those extra sugars from those simple sugars. I don't know if I hit all the chats, but maybe I'll get going and we can get to some of the other questions at the end. Oh yeah, you have control, not me.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was like, oh yeah.
That's okay. So a little bit about recovery now from an actual injury. And it's actually interesting because this whole pandemic we're in right now, we're actually treating athletes from a sports science perspective as being injured. Because if we get the green light for some sports to go ahead tomorrow or in a week, and we've got athletes who have decreased training, modified training, or even detrained over the last 2 months, it's going to be really important that they've had at least their base amount of carbs, proteins, fats, overall nutrition, and energy sustained during this modified training period, so that when they hit the ground running, which they're not going to, it's going to be just like a return to play. They're calling it a return to train model, where it's going to be very phased in. And likewise, their nutrition will be very phased in as well, because their energy demands will increase like it was in their original training schedules. But in the event of an actual recovery, so let's say we have an athlete who is injured, had an athlete today, has been, had a fractured something, can't remember, been a long day, and now is looking at getting in some nutrition. This happened in the fall, and I'm seeing her now. I'm like, why didn't you contact me in the fall? Well, I wasn't training, so I thought I was resting, and that was enough. We'll know that there's some key nutrition components that can actually help speed up that recovery. She might have been back to training, sooner had we been able to get a little more quality nutrients in. So increased energy needs. Again, mind says I'm not training. I need to decrease my energy. Which now, if somebody's at a 4,000 calorie, energy demand, and they're dropping down to 0 training, like in a 2 week acute recovery phase, yeah, their needs might be a little bit less, but it may not be as low as what they actually think, because you actually still need extra energy above your overall basal resting kind of energy needs to help support that recovery phase. So we look at these kind of 2 plates as being, almost like a moderate to heavy training. And again, very individual. It's going to depend on exactly what they're doing. They might be doing some physio. They might be on crutches, exerting a little more energy. So you have to support that energy demand as well. So it's just not all about slashing the overall intake down, cutting everything kind of in half, where that's what a lot of them do. Okay, you can flip. So we talked a little bit about protein. Again, their protein needs in general might be anywhere between 1.2 to 1.7, 1.8 grams per kilo in a normal training environment. Now we're looking at recovery from injury. So now it could be bone, could be muscle, could be ligament. In general, we need to bump up that overall protein amount. And even right now, in isolation and detraining mode, or modified, I hate saying detraining because it's like you're never going back, but modified training, we're actually suggesting a 2 to 2.2 grams per kilo protein, almost again like an injured athlete. And that's to really protect the muscle, the lean muscle mass they have, and not lose that muscle mass, while also maximizing again recovery and protein synthesis. Same principles, split it out, 20 to 35 grams, 4 to 6 times a day. Quality counts. So we have 11 essential amino acids. I always use my kid's he's not little, so much little anymore, but he still uses Lego blocks. So if you think of all the different color Lego blocks and shapes and pieces, you have 20 different colors and sizes and shapes of Lego blocks. Those are all 20 different amino acids. 11 of them are essential, so don't make them in our body. 9 we do make. When we talk about complete proteins would have all those 11 essential amino acids and varying other amounts of those other 9. And we know that animal products have all those 11 essential amino acids, and some of them maybe even branch chain amino acids, which we know can augment or they're sort of like the precursors to that stimulus for muscle recovery. So it's really important to have, and again, there's an amount we know in the research, about 10 grams of those essential amino acids. How do we get those? Animal products, all those quality foods Melissa just looked at. Dairy being one, because one of the amino acids is sort of the king in the literature. There might be others, and I'm probably getting into my other slides, but I just talk off the cuff. So leucine is one. Isoleucine and valine are your 3 sort of branch chain amino acids. Literature just hasn't supported the others. Not to say they're bad. We just don't know enough yet. But what we do know is that leucine, which is the highest in whey. So again, we know whey is sort of the fastest acting protein, and it probably has something to do with the leucine content of whey. We know egg has a high leucine content. We know soy has a high leucine content. Other forms of leucine, again, tend to be, unless you're taking a supplement, might be harder to get that amount of that particular amino acid in that recovery. So when we talk about, again, different protein powders, whey tends to be the one, if they can tolerate it, would probably be the best. If they're vegan and they want to have like a pea-based or a hemp-based protein, not going to get that leucine. I've yet to see a good, tasty soy protein powder, but soy would be another alternative that would have that leucine in. So quality protein, soy we talked about, egg, meat products, dairy, all your dairy, very high. The other one that we didn't mention was quinoa. So quinoa is actually a complete protein as well, not really high in leucine, but a good quality protein. So it's a good protein to kind of have in through the day if they're focusing on alternatives to meat and animal product proteins. So yeah, looking at the 8 to 10 grams of essential amino acids, you're going to get branch chain amino acids generally coming from, again, I'm not endorsed by the dairy farmers of Canada or anything. I just am strictly stating the science behind dairy. It naturally has branch chain amino acids. So if we're doing a good post-recovery smoothie, or like Melissa said, your yogurts and things like that, probably going to get that just in general with that. And then you're going to get multi other nutrients, phosphorus, calcium, D, right? All those other things that you wouldn't get just from a 3 branch chain amino acid tasty blackberry drink. Okay. So again, looking at carbohydrates, we want to maybe have a lower carbohydrate intake than maybe what they were at before. And we've got different amounts for different types of intensities of exercise. In a recovery phase, like again, from injury, if we're looking at an endurance athlete who's again, on modified training or have stopped training, those carbohydrate needs are probably going to come down. Likewise, we've got a really poor eating athlete who never did a great job of carbohydrate to begin with. They actually might have to have an increased need for carbohydrate in that recovery phase. It's going to provide energy, and it's going to help with the protein be absorbed and maximize that protein synthesis again. So those numbers on there, again, kind of in general, depends on where they've actually started or came from, but most likely still going to be moderate, but maybe not as high as what they were in an aerobic phase. Okay, there's lots of, again, talk in the sport world around tart cherry lately. It's kind of come back a little bit. There's been a couple new research papers to kind of support the potential for, again, it's the flavonoids, decreasing inflammation, maybe helping with muscle soreness. We know we probably can't get the amount of effective dose of flavonoid coming from a palatable tart cherry drink. So this is where you'll probably see some tart cherry supplements start hitting the Popeye shelves soon. In fact, we just had a message on our chat board the other day saying, does anyone know of a tart cherry supplement, like an actual, powder? Don't have one that's tested, can't recommend it. So you know what, just start getting your flavonoids in, have a nice piece of dark chocolate and have some cherry juice every now and then. And you might even get some benefits from the melatonin if you have trouble sleeping. So a little bit more to be discovered around tart cherry, but lots of other good benefits, good carbohydrates, other antioxidants. So good way to start kind of just getting some in general. All right, vitamin D. Yeah, we had some sun today. I don't know about any sport other than maybe beach volleyball or maybe track running that dose their mid-drift 11 to 3 in the middle of the summer with no SPF on to get about 1,000 or maybe 2,000 international units synthesized through the skin from the sun. So it's great. It's one of our major sources, but we're doing our due diligence and protecting ourselves. So we probably don't synthesize that much from vitamin D from the sun. However, we've got indoor sports or injured athletes inside, not training. Yeah, we know it's got a protective effect for bone health. A lot of research recently around its neuroprotective benefits. So concussion, recovery from concussion. And again, just not recovery, but how well was their actual vitamin D status before they were actually injured. So this is one area that we're actually seeing athletes have a higher recommendation than other non-athletes. So doc gives you blood work, you get your vitamin D check. They say, oh yeah, you're fine, just like your iron, right? Well, no, athletes actually have a bit of a higher base minimum for adequate status. So our target's actually it's over 75 nanomoles per liter. If your athletes are getting like annual blood work done, they should be getting annual blood work done, and vitamin D should be included in that. Even if the doc says, no, we had your vitamin D checked 2 years ago, you're fine. We're only allowed to get vitamin D checked once a year in Nova Scotia, unfortunately. Anywhere else in the country, BC, I know for sure, can have it twice. And if you're under their benchmark, which is 20, I think it's even lower than that, isn't it, Melissa? I can't remember, but like the general baseline, if that's normal, they'll say you won't be allowed to get another vitamin D done until it becomes deficient. So you kind of need a good sport doc on your side because they know the higher recommendations. We have lots of research to support that it actually has a muscle protective function as well. And it helps with strength and endurance performance. So it's not just about bone health anymore, and a small role in immune function. So it's a really important one. Most of our athletes are on vitamin D. strategically all through the year, maybe less in the summer, more in the winter. And it can go as high as, I've seen it as some of the research, 5,000, 6,000. And I think there was one paper that even was 10,000 IUs of vitamin D. I've never recommended that much. But it's probably safe to be at a 1,000 to 2,000 international units per day in a recovery phase. And especially in concussion, it might go a little bit higher than that. All right, omega-3s. I just had a whole lecture to my university class tonight on fat, so I'm fatted out today. But obviously there's some great neuroprotective, again, anti-inflammatory properties from our omega-3 essential fatty acids. Again, can't make it, have to take it in. This is one, again, that I see athletes just not doing enough of, right? On average, 3 fatty fish sources a week probably still isn't enough to support a recovery. Definitely not a recovery, but just overall general natural meeting our essential fatty acids, omega-3s. EPA, DHA, those are fatty fish essential omega-3s. There's also ALA, or alpha linoleic acid. That's from our plant sources. Doesn't have the same property. So if you say, well, doesn't plant sterols and don't, flax and chia, don't they all have great omega-3s? Yeah, different property. Still great, and they have other nutrients, but the fatty fishes, and I put a little acronym in there, SMAShed. And if we had time, I'd get you all to guess what that stood for. Hopefully you all know. Salmon, mackerel, Arctic char, anchovies, sardines. I wish it was herring. I wish it was halibut. It is not. It's herring, trout, and then tuna on the end. So how many of our athletes eat any of those 3 times a week? Maybe salmon. It's expensive. So I got a lot of budget conscious athletes, right? Probably not going to be your top quality proteins for sure. Again, might be an opportunity to have a supplement there. I think I can show you one later. I'm in my clinic, so I have samples of all kinds of different stuff in here. EPA, DHA, you're usually going to get a mix. DHA is more, has been proven in the research to actually have more of a neuroprotective benefit and decrease inflammation in cognitive, so in reducing brain swelling from a concussion. So there's different supplements that might have a higher DHA than an EPA combination. And again, the amounts are, again, being refuted in the research, 3 to even 5 grams. I've seen it as high as 5 grams per day. That's a crap ton of fish. Probably not going to get that through diet. So combination of both might help. All right, other supplements. Again, a whole year-long topic we can talk about. Obviously, the third-party tested. We want to make sure we've got quality, free of potential of banned substances in any of these guys. They definitely have their merit, especially, we can get, I said, branched chain amino acids through diet, right? Probably not enough in terms of maybe a recovery phase. Maybe they're not getting enough of those, the other branched chain amino acids. So they might benefit, especially if they're non-dairy eaters or have a low meat intake. Creatine and BCAAs might be something that we would look at for a supplement. Different protocols for both of those. I'm not going to get into too much detail on that. Interesting thing about concussion recovery, if you already have creatine, again, naturally occurring through animal game meats, but if you're doing that as part of your strategic sort of supplement in training protocols, we're seeing a faster return to play from recovery from concussion if someone has already had that creatine in their system, or a higher levels of creatine. Not to say they still can't benefit in the immediate recovery from dosing with creatine at that point. Hard when we're dealing with adolescent sports, can't use creatine. So again, we're promoting sunflower seeds, we're promoting elk, bison. Yeah, right, Ange. I'm sure my kids are going to eat those, right? So hopefully we can do all the other stuff. Collagen and vitamin C, another interesting one in the research as of the last sort of 4 or 5 years. If there's an injury in terms of ligament injury, this might help re-strengthen that overall. I always use this as an example because this is what Keith Barr, his lab, this is what he told. This is how he explained it to us. You've got bone, you've got muscle or tendon, right? How that attaches to the bone. Well, in an injury, that becomes weakened and then hopefully not a break. What collagen with vitamin C sort of, again, helping that strengthen those bonds or those crosslinks, what it does is it literally rebuilds those crosslinks and makes a nice kind of fit between bone and ligaments. Again, it's kind of equivocal. How do you get collagen? Make a soup broth. What's the nice, gelatinous stuff that kind of floats on the top of your bone broth? That's collagen. No, you might want to put some orange juice in there and make a interesting soup. I don't know, or just have it with a glass of juice. But definitely, there's some there is some research around collagen and vitamin C. And now you look on the shelves, and there's collagen and vitamin C supplements, right? And then again, you want to take that before maybe some rehabilitation exercises where they need that muscle stimulation in order to get that activation occurring. So just some cool stuff I thought I'd throw out there. Don't go out and start buying, lots of collagen or making bone broths.
Bone broth. It's stinky, so be careful. Very stinky.
Yeah. But I will show you a link to an actual gelatin chew, which I mentioned this to one of my students the other day, and they said, Angela, that's great, but they suck. They're not really good. Melissa loves them.
Yeah, I love them.
Yeah, you can show it.
Yeah, you ready? Okay,
yeah.
It's not very long. I can't get it to expand, so.
Ribena juice. It's just naturally high in vitamin C. Knox gelatin powder. Yeah, see how kind of thick it is, right? So that's pretty much it. It's an easy way of getting it naturally. You can buy literally gelatin at the bulk barn if you dare go in there right now. But the Knox gelatin powder, I think you need 4 packages of it. So normally you need 1 for Jell-O. If you can think of the hard part that forms on top of the Jell-O, that's what the whole thing is like. And you need about a size like that in order to get the amount of collagen, which is 15 milligrams, and about 15 grams of collagen and 50 milligrams of vitamin C in that dose. So
you can also make it in fun shapes if you want to. You just have to eat more.
Yeah, totally. I've actually made this for an injured athlete at the Pyeongchang Games. And I literally had to crush a vitamin C tab and go buy a whisk and a bowl. And they're like, I don't care. I'll do whatever I can. I need to play the final game and I'm injured. So I'm not sure. They say that it's within 72 hours. So again, placebo or not, I don't know, at least you got a dose of vitamin C and carbohydrate.
Protein too. Yeah.
The slide right before that, Melissa, I'll just kind of quickly touch on. I'm not going to go into it in detail, but this is a great paper on return to play for, I think it was based on team sports, but it's kind of like the recovery nutrition Bible right now. It, again, goes through all the carbs, the protein, fluid, creatine, omega-3, vitamin D. We didn't talk a whole lot about antioxidants, but those are all your nuts, your seeds, your fruits, veg, for anti-inflammatories. The gelatin vitamin C is down there. We didn't talk about curcumin. Again, another one like tart cherry. You need your whole half a bottle of curcumin to get the dose that is effective for anti-inflammatories, but hey, start using it in, your cooking, and maybe make some interesting smoothies. I've made a curcumin, I think, muffin for one of my teens before, and it wasn't too bad. And then bromelain down at the bottom too. So again, all sort of reducing inflammation. Somebody had some questions.
Yeah,
I think that's the last.
There's one about like dietary restrictions. So that's always a big one. Do you want to answer that one, or do you want me to?
Yeah, is soy the only, is that the one? Clarify protein in milk, soy the only sufficient alternative. Yeah. Other than, if they're lactose intolerant, you can get a lactose-free milk and still get all of the benefits without the lactose. But once you start switching to other non-dairy alternatives, the protein just isn't there. I haven't seen any. You get like cashew milk's got some great B12. It's got some other stuff, but not the protein.
Yeah, and I think there was a question about like, how do you include athletes that have dietary restrictions like allergies and celiac? It is, obviously that's like a whole other conversation. It's, if you're looking for the carbohydrates, then we would probably swing towards like, I'm a big advocate. I love potatoes. I use those all the time for recovery, or like there are a lot of things that don't have celiac in them that are really good, high quality carbohydrates. And then, pardon me, go ahead. Rice,
rice noodles, rice based anything, corn based, you're going to get good whole grains from those. Yeah.
And if you do have allergies, like I did have a roommate who had like, couldn't do dairy, couldn't do soy. So like, obviously then she has to do almond or other stuff like that. You just have to get your protein from somewhere else. Then you just have to work with allergies, and sensitivities definitely add a different scenario in there, but that's just like talking through with the athlete and figuring out.
Really good points.
You have to meet them where they're at for sure.
Yeah.
And then like the gelatin chews for preventing injury, I've definitely read one or two articles about, and this is one or two articles, so that I'm not standing on my podium and saying that this is the golden truth, but there are some articles to show for tendon strength, particularly one article I read about ankle strength was taking gelatin and seeing that it was actually people who had family genetic stuff seeing an increased strength in their ankle strength after taking gelatin for a continued amount of time. But that's like one or two papers. Not enough that I can be like, yes, it will prevent injury.
The other interesting part of that is we know estrogen, by virtue of what estrogen does in females, it creates lax in our ligaments. So if we're looking at strategically maybe supplementing with collagen, I would look at female athletes in their certain times of their menstrual cycle where their estrogen is high. And there's been lots of kind of anecdotal and not anecdotal, but research on female team sports, especially in soccer with ACL injuries, and doing a strategic sort of cyclic dose of collagen to help strengthen that time where their ligaments are actually more lax. So again, whether you're dosing in bone broth or having an actual supplement form, might be something to consider. I had the question about before, can you get too stiff, right? Like, so if you're doing this all the time, that could be a potential. I know we had a gymnast where we were, again, prone to ligament injuries, and we were like, well, should we just be dosing, as a preventative maintenance with collagen? We weren't really 100% on the results of doing that sort of carte blanche throughout the training season, but maybe looking at more times of more intense training, and then maybe looking at bumping that up at those times. So yeah, exactly, in female soccer. And it all tends to happen around the same time, right? So as female athletes train together, their cycles become more consolidated, so they have similar cycles. That's why that happens. And sometimes, and this is Melissa's sort of wheelhouse in terms of female nutrition, but should we be altering their training based on their cycles. So, don't do a high intensity HIIT training when their estrogen is through the roof, right? Maybe we should be doing that when it's lower and progesterone's higher, et cetera, et cetera. So that we can protect those types of injuries from happening just based on their natural physiology.
Yeah, so cool. I love it.
I think that's the end of our slides. I don't know if there's another.
No, that's it. That's all we have. We've taken all the time.
Hey, awesome. No, that's great. I know I personally can listen to nutrition forever, so this is so awesome. And just on that point too about female nutrition, we do have a recording of Melissa's previous session all about female nutrition and menstrual cycle. So definitely check out that recording. It's really interesting and goes into what Angela was talking about of what to eat during certain times of your cycle and what to be training and things like that. So thank you, Angela and Melissa. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to speak up now or write in the chat box. I know we've already asked a few questions already. There's one coming up here. I'll just read it out loud. So for swimmers, should they eat recovery snacks in between every single event? Some of them have long periods of time before their swim. So would it be a good idea for them to stock up on carbs?
Coach.ca has they did have a good fact sheet that I wrote on swimming recovery. I think they took all the fact sheets down. I don't know why. Maybe Christy, you can find out that. I don't know.
See what I can do. They just revamped their whole website, so
I know.
I'm not sure. It could be hidden somewhere, but
I don't know.
I'll look into it.
It was good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, it's going to depend on the time they have. If they've got a long period time, then yeah, you probably want to have a good, 10, 15, maybe even 20 grams of easily digested carbohydrate and protein. Sorry, 10 to 20 grams of protein. It's going to be what's easily digested. So no, I probably wouldn't recommend like a high fiber pasta meal with lean ground beef, but maybe like a recovery drink. The core power drinks are really good. They've got about a 1-to-1 ratio carbs to protein, so you might have to get like again a piece of fruit, high GI, high glycemic index, carbohydrate, and then just easily digested proteins. 2 cups of chocolate milk and a banana.
Yeah, and if there's someone, so a lot of athletes have a really hard time consuming food in between competition, like if your stomach's a bit iffy. If they are one of those people, then kind of stocking up on carbs beforehand isn't a bad idea. Yeah. If it's someone who like really struggles with that, the nerves and everything in between kind of session.
Is there any chance that there may be a future course on vegetarians or vegetarian diets and that, just because I know with our soccer players, and my daughter's one of them that's just trying to go, she tried vegan, but that was too strong, so trying to go vegetarian. But there's other girls too, and you can tell their energy levels are not there. They're building muscles.
It's hard. I tried going vegetarian vegan for a while myself as a dietitian, and I couldn't stay on top of my protein and everything needs. It's you can do it, but holy Hannah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's hard for the teenager that I'm slowly making my way.
Yeah,
it's not just French fries and what else? Yeah,
no, she actually eats very healthy, but
that's awesome. Yes.
I would probably recommend like getting blood work too. So that's the first thing I always ask.
I did. I made her.
Yeah, and regular awesome. Follow up.
Yeah, work. I think it's about time for one. That's good.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can get to our doctor soon. But I think it would be awesome to do one for vegetarian side of it, because I know I have endless amounts of athletes that have went vegetarian.
Even if they're like I'm a, what do I call myself? Because I just ovo-lacto-pulo vegetarian. But and it's stopped when I had to do autopsies, rotating through medical laboratory science. That's when it just struck me, and I had stopped. And a lot of nurses, it happens to them as well.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it really is a personal preference. I mean, yeah, you can do it. It's just I find it's harder with athletes because of their travel schedule. So
Yes.
we're going to these countries and, you know, to get those basic nutrients from plant sources
Yes.
and other nutrients met is really challenging.
Right. Yeah, good point. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Hi, Hugo.
I have a quick question. First of all, thank you both so much. I love your nutrition talks whenever either of you are on here. Super informative. But so I'm a competitive swimming coach. A lot of our practices, you know, they happen in the morning. You're in the pool at 5:30 a.m. and you hear a lot of the athletes say like, we don't feel like we feel really sick. We eat before practice. Should we eat before practice? And I'm wondering if working out or training fasted has any effect on your recovery afterwards. Like, should you overcompensate, have more carbs because you haven't had that intake beforehand or not?
Do you want me to go? Do you want to go?
Well,
Good
I can do part of like, it's a little bit of my recommendation for like, that would be the athlete that I would want them to really have a good bedtime snack. One thing, like really make sure you get like because it is really hard for some athletes to eat before they go in the water, especially the pool, because as much as I'd love you to grab a snack from the poolside, you're going to be in big trouble if that happens. But so like really making sure that they have good carbohydrates, particularly in protein the night before, is going to be super key. And then anything that they can just sneak in the morning, if it's just like as half of a banana or sipping on a little bit of like something, that's my part of it. And then Angela, take over.
So there's some cool research around carbohydrate mouth rinsing. Have you heard of that?
Mm-hmm. No.
Okay.
Or sniffing salts.
Yeah. So if they can get a little bit of carbohydrate, like again, homemade sports drink, Gatorade, whatever they can tolerate, if they can actually drink that, even just like a couple of sips, they're going to top up their glycogen, their hydration, which they would have normally dehydrated through the night. If they even can't do that, especially on race days sometimes, where their gut's a little upset, swishing not mouthwash. Don't do mouthwash because that deactivates the sensory receptors in the mouth that actually sends signals to the brain that carbohydrates on the way, and it actually has a bit of a ergogenic effect, as if you were actually ingesting carbohydrate and replacing glycogen. So swish, 15 seconds, spit, about 15-20 minutes before their training, and they may be able to at least get a bit of a bump. Yeah, the bedtime snack and all that too, but in place of nothing else, carbohydrate mouth rinse.
Neat, thank you.
And they will need to make up some carbs for sure after.
Yeah,
definitely.
Bowl of white rice.
Big old bowl of white rice. Just
white everything before competition. Like gone to the parents of like high fiber, whole grain, like let's dose you full of fiber right before you hit the pool, right? No. Definitely low fiber, probably even like 2 to 3 days before, especially if they've got a really nervous gut. That's a whole other low FODMAP training before competition that we generally use with kind of gut sensitive athletes.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Okay. Any last minute questions?
You're all going to go make bone broth and gelatin chews, right? And you're going to have good complexions.
The gelatin chews kind of looked like the fruit to goes to me. Like they just looked like a less, I don't know, thick version.
If you're a runner or a cyclist, though, they do melt in your back pocket. Just a warning. They don't last in your back pocket.
And you can make it with, again, like a regular, just normal juice, and then add a bit of emergency, which isn't tested, but it will bump up the vitamin C. Ribena juice is just naturally high in vitamin C. That's why we use that one, because we don't have to use a supplement.
Yeah, and you can even just do it as a drink too. You don't even have to heat it up. You can just Ribena, orange juice, add in the gelatin, stir it quickly, and
yum.
Not as fun as a gelatin in my mind, but it works.
Thanks, guys. We had a great
Awesome.
time tonight.
Yeah, awesome turnout. And thank you so much to everyone for attending. And thank you to Angela and Melissa for another great presentation. And they will be rejoining us for some future nutrition talks too. So be sure to check those out. Our next talk is tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. with Natasha, who's going to be talking about leadership and specifically how to inspire athletes and coaches. So definitely check that one out. And then we will have Jack on Thursday afternoon to talk about how to engage your athletes during this time of isolation. So another exciting lineup for this week, and a reminder that everything will be posted online on our YouTube page, so definitely check that out as well. And thank you everyone for attending, and thank you again to Angela and Melissa. Have a good night, guys.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone.